What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to everybody's favorite sports performance and obviously energy drink podcast, the Bev Boys, the one-stop shop for all your performance talks and energy drink reviews. I'm Brian.
I'm Christian.
And of course, we are the Bev Boys. We're here today to pop top and talk shop. Little special occasion. Haven't been able to do this in a long time. I think we've had one in the past 6 months where we were able to match up. And this one was ironically that we matched up.
Yeah, we didn't even plan it. Brian was just like, "I got this," and I was like, "Oh, I actually just got that too." So I think we were thinking the same thing.
Great minds think alike, on the same wavelength. That's why we work well together. But I mean, should we give like a little 3, 2, 1 countdown?
That's right. Let's go. 3,
2,
2, 1. We got the Welch's Grape-Cran, newly released. This is really newly released, right? I think it was beginning of this year, right? 2026?
January 2026. We got that new right on the can.
That's right. It does say new, in fact. So yeah, kind of a play off the Welch's Grape, the original one. Gonna go like a cranberry grape flavor here. Can is also very similar. Instead of having it all this purple color, it's kind of got this cranberry color, if you will, in the middle. Same ghost formula as usual. I'm not usually a huge, like, I won't really go out of my way for like cranberry juice, but I am looking forward to trying this because it is, I really like the Welch's Grape. Speaking of the Welch's Grape, I've been noticing our pitching coordinator here in Arizona. Shout out Matt Hinckley if you're watching this. Dude slams Ghost like every day. He's a legit Bev
Guy's
boy.
a dog.
And I was like,
Guy's a dog.
Like, yeah, you like Ghost? He's like, yeah. I was like, what's your favorite flavor? He says it's the Welch's Grape. I've seen him cracking that. The Straw Bango, I think the original. So yeah, we're not the only ones.
Super excited for the Grape-Cran. Just because of like, if it goes well, what could be. Because there's like the cran apple. There's like just straight up Concord grape, a white grape maybe. That might be super good. You know, all the different flavors that could come out of it with Welch's. But some people don't like just the straight Welch's grape because they're like, oh, it's too sweet. So maybe this is that middle ground between the two that brings a little bit of tart with the sweetness and balances it out. My theory is that if you're not a super sweet person and you like the Welch's Grape, you'll like the Welch's Grape-Cran more because it's a little bit, probably, I would assume at least a little bit more balanced on that with having the cranberry in there. And cranberry is a different flavor. Nobody really goes after that. I couldn't tell you the last time. I think the last cranberry energy drink that was out there was like a Red Bull flavor. And that was like a winter season like 2 years ago. But I think that was actually right before we started. But I think that was the last time like cranberry was introduced into the space. So
yeah,
cyclical but groundbreaking.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because like I'm usually more on the sweeter side of things. I prefer a little sweeter flavors. Brian's a little bit more on the tart end of the spectrum. So I'm interested to see. I'm sure I'm gonna like it to an extent, but how
is it better for you?
Yeah, like if it surprises me, if it exceeds expectations. Side note, dude, I would really love like a white grape flavor. White grape just reminds me of, and I mean, we've talked about this before. New Year's Eve, sparkling juice. You got the white grape flavor, just elite memories.
A sparkling white grape, a Welch's sparkling white grape would be incredible in an energy drink. Shout out Juicy Juice. That was like when we first started. That was a clip that actually took off for us when I talked about my grandfather's funeral.
I talked about your dead grandpa and how that was the first time that you drank Juicy Juice. I don't know if that's a good thing that was the memory that came up for you, but at least it was a happy one, I guess.
Look, you got to find the silver lining in everything, right?
Hey, it's true. You were doing it from a young age.
Should we pop top and talk shop?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, you got some vapor?
I got some splashage, like other side of the table type shit. I think that's like like that's like the first. I guess wow, that was really a
Contain
really
yourself.
yeah. God, getting too excited.
You can definitely tell that there's like a little bit of cranberry in the smell.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is what I taste. Initial grape, finish with cranberry.
Yeah, strong grape at the outset. Yeah, strong grape, and then the cranberry kind of fades in for me.
That's where I'm at. Like you get the initial same Welch's like Ghost Energy flavor on that first, the moment it hits your lips, no pause. And as you as you swallow, you get that
Careful
you
what you
get
say
that
here.
you get that cranberry finish. This, you know, Ghost has always been one of those companies that their drinks are like the whole company, I should say, is more of a lifestyle type of thing than it is just we make energy drinks. Like it's this whole branding, this ecosystem of their clothes, their supplements and performance products, their lifestyle products, their energy drinks. Like their whole brand is very much like fit fitness into your life, enjoy things that you like, and have fun, party hard, work hard. That whole shtick has been like their whole deal, right? Not to go way overboard, but this is one of those ones where you're like, and they've done this with a lot of their flavors. And original was actually intended for this purpose of being like a mixer in a drink. The Grape-Cran would be phenomenal, like in like I'm just thinking like a transfusion, like on the golf course. Like get the little ginger beer, top it off with that. Like I think that would be phenomenal. That's just me. I'm like this would be like I would take this on the golf course if you're like, hey, I'm gonna hit a morning round, or you're going on like the bachelor party weekend. Some people do golf trips, and you're like, I don't really want to drink, but like throw this into a plastic cup with some ice. You get the feeling of like you're having a drink with everybody, but you're just crushing an energy drink. You know what I mean? Speaking of
Yeah.
which, I'm not to go on another like side tangent here, but some dude, I just saw this Instagram reel yesterday. Some dude went in there and he said, why do we not have energy drinks as like a cocktail part, like as people leave the wedding? And I was like, that sounds awesome. But then he's like, imagine this. You come, the bride and groom walk out, and then you walk out. They got the Alani News or the Celsius for the ladies, and on the men's side, on ice, cans of White Monster. Everybody's tired in that morning session, but it's a big party and there's dinner and all that stuff. He's like, crack a White Monster. You just grab a screaming cold can. If I ever man up and do this thing again in my life, maybe that's what I got to do.
Yeah, don't give me any ideas. 30% of the wedding cost is energy drinks.
Why is there a $10,000 line for
Yeah.
bum?
Oh man,
What is
did you
bum?
see that? Did you see that? Did you see that post that Ghost Energy made a while back where it was like a meme? It was like a $6,000 charge, and it was like a screenshot. It was like the screen was on like the thank you for your order, and like above you can see the messages from the dude's like girlfriend. It was like $6,500 charge on our joint account. Is it what I think it is? With like a ring emoji, and then like the screen is just like Amazon, like 260 12 packs of Ghost Energy, and says like thank you for your order.
I swear to God, it
Man,
wasn't me.
yeah. Man, I'm wondering, dude. I feel like I used to know like a lot of like the ambassadors for like the brands that I followed, like Ghost. I noticed on their website right now, I recognize like 3 people. Also,
Ghost
there's like
used to,
50. There's like 50 people. I feel like
yeah,
the standard is like
10.
Jesus. Yeah, yeah. I guess.
Where's the
I guess
ambassadors anymore
anyone,
now?
but anyone with abs or a fucking big butt can get a sponsorship. You go to Ghost, like their official website, and then you go to the brand, and then you go meet the
Meet the
team.
team.
Yeah, and there's I literally recognize Max Tuning and Rob Lipset, and that's it. Like I don't know any of these
Rob
other people.
Rob Lipset. Um,
That's the only. I feel like I've heard of Muhammad Sadiq before, but like all
Muhammad
these other
Sadiq is
people.
big.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any of these other people.
Um, I feel bad saying this, but
Who's
like I know Cole Hosman and Peter Molina because they're skateboarders, but like Bobby Ray Gray looks like a dog. A lot of these guys, I have no idea. And wow, you
that
are right
bald
though.
gamer? That bald gamer.
There is a ton of ambassadors now.
Oh, Raymond Carito,
Oh,
the online
I just
coach. I
saw.
remember
I
him.
ju- I just saw that bald gamer.
He's OG with
Um,
this YouTube.
David Templer looks familiar. Don't really know him, but he looks. I know the Stafford brothers. They were like OG guys with Ghost like 6 years ago. They had the grapefruit flavor. Sony was like, I think he's a gamer. He was like what made them start like Ghost Gamer, and then like when they started working with like FaZe Clan. But I do know this guy up at the top, next to Sydney Cummings and Matt or Max, like Brody Fallgaust. He makes a lot of like just gym memes, and then Luke Elsman, like I think that's like they're buddies. But here's the hard part, man. I get Alex Toplin sounds familiar. Muhammad Sadiq is like he's been like a jack dude for a while. Like he's been around. Um, Max is like the only OG with the Stafford brothers left now.
Yeah, Guzman's
Because I
doing his
know
own thing.
Guzman,
Obviously, I don't
he's
even
with
know who
Raw.
else was with them.
They had what's his name from Barbell Brigade?
Oh, Barkwan.
I think it was Burt Kwan. Yeah.
Barkwan.
Um, they had can't remember the girl, but she had her own flavor of the greens. There really used to be like 5 or 6 people. It was a really tight ship, small crew. But I think now that obviously that purchased by Keurig Dr. Pepper, they're gonna like expand it. They have people in entertainment. Brooke Evers, she was with them for a while. She's not like an OOG, but she was like a second round kind of OG.
Hmm.
I don't know who Kylie Miller is. She looks like not to talk shit, but she really looks like one of those Secret Lives of Mormon wives.
Nice.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, she's talking about she's a Converse girly and has a dog named Nash. So I mean that tracks.
God, so many jokes I want to say, but I also don't want to get us canceled.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking through here, and it's Allie Bess. She's still with him, or Bessie. She's been with them for a minute. Here's the thing, man. Get us on one of these. That should be our goal. Can one of these companies take a shot in the dark on two idiots with a camera and a mic?
I
And
mean,
at the
that's
very
essentially what all
least,
these other people are.
that is true. Maybe we should just start taking trend and then take cut off and shirtless pictures.
Honestly, dude, I'm thinking what our picture would be like on their website. I'm thinking like it just says Bad Boys, and then we're standing like back to back with the arms crossed type shit.
I either
Make it
thought of
real
it.
dramatic.
I was thinking either like really dramatic or like kind of on the Max side, like super goofy, where we're like both pointing at
Yeah.
like a can.
Well, it could be that Michelangelo
I
picture
mean,
we
yeah,
did with the C4
on our
can.
website,
Yeah.
on our website,
Hmm.
C4, hook us up. I mean, that's sick branding right there.
Yeah, we should have got some royalties for that for sure.
We might have to redrop that picture on Instagram and just tag
Dude,
C4.
we should.
First form.
Definitely,
I
we
mean,
definitely need to do that.
we did chat it up at first form when they were at CSCCA. So that was great. Maybe they want to take a shot in the dark on us. They got great stuff. I'll push it.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, we do have some cool topics to kind of talk about today. You sent me one. I mean, I think we're on a good track about just sending each other random stuff now of stuff that we want to get into. But I want to dig so far into like this Peter principle.
So do I.
I
And I think we can
I
really,
go
yeah, I
ahead.
mean,
Just go.
we could just looking through these different, like, syndromes, principles. I don't even know what you call them, like
Theories.
theories, laws. You can get into like different, like, mental biases and stuff like that. You can kind of go down a rabbit hole. I usually like to go to like, once you look at one and you're on the Wikipedia page, and then at the bottom it's like see also, and it's like 5 other things that also look super interesting and just leads down a rabbit hole. We could do we could do multiple episodes just on stuff like that. But yeah, the Peter principle. I had read this. Oh, I think it was in. I don't think it was in Think Again. Maybe it was in Think. I don't know if it was in Think Again or if it was in the last book I read. It was by Morgan Housel, Same as Ever. And essentially, I have some notes written down on the Wikipedia page. Hold up. But it says it's a management concept developed by this guy Lawrence J. Peter. Essentially, the Peter principle is that in people that are in a hierarchy, so think of any like corporate hierarchy, job, whichever field that might be, people in a hierarchy tend to rise to a level of respective incompetence. So essentially, people continue to get promoted based on the success that they have in previous job titles. These are usually people that are kind of, overachievers or maybe like a little bit more skilled than the average worker. They will tend to just keep getting promoted until they reach a level where they're no longer competent. And that's because skills in one job don't necessarily translate to another. So essentially, think about someone who starts off as like an entry-level position. They kill it. They just keep getting promoted until they're in a position that doesn't resemble that first position at all. And they just kind of are incompetent in that because it's so different, or they just kind of weren't able to learn as quickly. And this kind of made me think about a conversation I was having with actually the guy I'm going to get to work with this year in AAA, Connor Rooney. Definitely follow Rooney Performance if you want some outside of the box training ideas as far as training and throwing. But we were kind of talking about how, and I think this relates to S&C and in the college domain as well. The higher you kind of climb up the ladder, the less the job looks like it did when you first started. Like, think about the difference between an assistant and a director, and then like someone in like an assistant AD role or more of like an administrative role. You may just keep getting promoted because at first you are really good at a lower position, and so you just keep getting promoted. You do pretty well there, but I think we can all agree that being an assistant AD and the things that probably come with that, more administrative, we weren't really trained. A lot of strength coaches usually studied stuff like exercise science or something similar. Not everybody, but we weren't really trained in like management or administration. We were trained in, exercise science, and, through internships and stuff like that, we learned how to, train athletes. And essentially you can kind of, by being a really good employee at what you're doing now, you can almost like Deadpool yourself into a spot where you just have no idea what the hell you're doing. Which is, it's interesting to me, and it had me thinking about because another thing that I notice is with coaching, the jobs that pay the most tend to be those more like administrative jobs in sports, at least. Obviously you can be like a head coach and like for a sport, and that can pay a lot of money, especially if it's one of like the big 3 or 4 sports. But thinking about S&C in particular, you want to be like an assistant AD and like kind of do less in the trenches coaching with athletes and more like overseeing, managing people. It looks a lot different from, when you first started coaching. And it made me think about do people actually want those jobs for what they are, or do they just gravitate toward them because they pay the most money? I think it's probably a little bit of both, maybe, but
I think this is the hard part, is like the one I go back to is like you said, like very niche knowledge or expertise, where a lot of coaches' expertise is in the kinesiology, the exercise science, foundational principles. They're not essentially, for the most part, they're not taught to manage others, to create large systems, to be able to place interchangeable pieces into to keep things flowing. And I think that's a really tough thing, especially now, which good, bad, and ugly with the way this is going. But like CSCS, you can't have any college degree. You have to have a kinesiology degree, which for some portion, like it's a good thing to know that there's like a good foundational understanding. But this is something that we've always kind of talked about with a lot of like interns as they kind of go to like a GA spots. Like go, like you don't have to do a KHS masters. Like go do an MBA. Like broaden your knowledge base to become more valuable somewhere. And I think a lot of people don't have the broad knowledge base anymore. And is that a systematic problem? Is that a personal problem? You kind of have to like. I personally think it's a little bit of both. People don't have the self desire to continue to broaden the knowledge that may not serve them in the immediate short term. That I think hurts more than anything else. But there's also systematic issues in that, in which it's like, why go for something extra, pay extra to get to the same position in hopes that maybe, a very, very delayed gratification on that may occur and you'll be set up for success there. Um, the crazy thing about the Peter Principle isn't just the fact that like you'll continuously get promoted until you find that level of incompetence where you're not going to fit, but these side theories outside of it, like they have the Dilbert Principle. They had the like the lateral arabesque, which was another action of a pseudo promotion, um, or
Essentially, I think that one was like it's almost like a lateral move, and they just give you like a longer
longer
job
title.
title. But and I don't know
Nothing
if it was
really
the Dilbert.
changes.
Yeah, and like the Dilbert, I was looking at the Dilbert principle as well,
That's
and it was one of those
essentially
things. It's like, okay, let's get this person to a more of an administrative role, essentially to get them out of the way of getting in the way of productivity. So like, you can kind of send someone who's like fucking the productivity up, get them into more of an administrative role where they're not really going to be as hands on, because they've kind of gotten to that point where they're incompetent because they've been promoted so much. And the lateral arabesque is like another like good. That's I feel like you would see that a little bit more when people like they probably should be let go, but
yeah.
people don't want to like fire that person. So like, all right, we'll kind of just make a lateral move, give them a fancy job title, keep them at the same salary, and silently it's gonna take them out of the equation of actually like making things happen. Like they're a little bit less important, but we're not trying to make them feel that way, if that makes sense.
What I don't understand with a lot of this, though, for both the Dilbert Principle, the lateral arabesque, and those things where they really kind of hammer home like you got kicked upstairs, like they
Mm-hmm.
pushed him up there to get him out of the way. If they're at a level of incompetence to a certain degree, whether it be sports, whether it be you know startup companies, tech, Walmart, all these different things, it's a transactional relationship. Like you're not hired just because someone thinks you're a good person. You have to have a requisite of skills and productivity in order to make things occur, especially from the fact that most people who are hired at a company are not hired as a founder who their job is to essentially idealize and create and then get someone to make that happen with the details forth, and then so they can free up their time to then go and do it again and again and again. If you're incompetent and cannot get things accomplished and you're getting in the way of workflow or productivity, why not remove it? Is that like the almost like, in a sense, is it just the over like humanization of people to each other? And obviously it doesn't have to be cutthroat, Or, in some way, is it almost like a sunken cost fallacy where they're like, we've invested so much in this person, we can't get rid of them. We want to figure it out. But if you want to figure it out, why are you removing them from the issue instead of confronting it and saying, here's what's wrong, here's what needs to be better? You know, I I don't know why this happens. I mean, I know it happens all too well and all too much all the time. Is it just a lack of skill set from maybe those above to where they're like not equipped or not ready to have those conversations of shit sucks, man. Like you got to figure this out.
Another thing I think that plays into that is, if we're thinking about an athletic director, how often do they really know all of the departments that they oversee in like a detailed fashion? Like, do they know what
Very
they're
true.
looking for in a strength and conditioning coach? Like, if you're an athletic director, do you know what you're looking for in a strength and conditioning coach? Do you know what you're looking for in an athletic trainer? Do you know what you're looking for in a graduate assistant? Do you know what you're looking for in a head tennis coach? You probably know a little bit about a lot, but do you know? And maybe I'm speaking from ignorance here, but like I think that's what makes it kind of tough. Like it's tough to say someone's doing a bad job when you don't know what a bad job looks like.
To the same given extent, though, like if you don't know, then how would you know that they're decreasing productivity or they're inhibiting the workflow?
It's true, and maybe they're in that position and they're at that level of
That's true.
incompetence as
Yeah.
well. You know, I think now that I remember from it, it's I was reading Governing Dynamics of Coaching, and
Yes.
that's where it mentioned the Peter Principle pretty early on. Super good book, by the way.
I
Just
think
started
within
reading
the
it. Definitely
first
recommend.
50 pages.
Yep. Within the first chapter for sure. And it talked about that and essentially how people, will just keep getting promoted. And something that I thought about that we had on Alex's episode is he talked about like administrative bloat and how like the people that are making a lot of money at the top, it doesn't seem like they really do anything. Like they just sit in meetings. They sit in a meeting to organize another meeting, and then the meeting doesn't really get much done. And meanwhile, you're, working in the trenches day to day with the actual athletes, and you're making less. So stuff like that. Yeah, it's super interesting. There was another one too. I think it was within kind of like the Dilbert principle that talked about like an up and out type of, or maybe it was within the Peter principle,
Uh,
but like an up and out type of work environment where essentially their goal is to like keep promoting you until you can't do the job anymore, and then when you can't do the job anymore, it's basically like, all right, time for you to leave. I think that's kind of like a more cutthroat approach to management, I would say. I've heard, listening to a couple, the Founders podcast, which I know that we're both a fan of. He did an episode on Elon Musk and how Elon works, and that's essentially like, to me, that's kind of his like management style is like he doesn't care. One, it's hard to work for Elon for a long period of time from the stuff that I've read and heard, but like he doesn't care like if you've been with him 20 years, like if you're no longer like cutting it for him, like he's going to get rid of you. Like you have to produce or you get out.
what I don't, I guess, as we kind of talk through this and look through things, it's like trying to look for issues or falsehoods within the theory, right? And as I kind of look through this, it's much easier to hire a an entry level employee than a C suite or a mid or senior mid manager. Why continue to promote an incompetent employee up that high? Because then you're going to create this kind of cycle, right? Where this person doesn't cut it anymore. Get rid of them. Okay, well now it's going to cost you a lot more to either hire an outside one and bring it in after paying all that additional salary, training, etc. And then from there, you're either going to bring somebody in, which costs a ton more, or you have to hire the next person and backfill that position. Boom, 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 boom. If you don't believe that they're going to cut it, if we think of it as a more cutthroat perspective, why not be cutthroat completely instead of having this fallacy of, we'll give you this chance and just be like, okay, you're not working out, right? I'm probably speaking more so on the Dilbert principle than I am on the Peter principle, because they're going to continuously promote those incompetent workers. But as we look at it, it's like, just get rid of them and then bring the next person up from that level, instead of continuously working them up the chain, costing you more time, more money, where they could be inhibiting more workflow, more productivity. Like if we think of it as like a production manager in that sense, to where it's like, now that line is backed up, that line isn't producing the same amount of volume that it was. Or we think of it as like, if we think of it more in sports performance, okay, this person was a pretty incompetent coach, but you're going to promote them to maybe an assistant or associate, or even just director, or an assistant AD, associate AD. Now they're, everything underneath them gets kind of funneled back into that person, to where it's backlogged. It's now, this bottleneck that we have, and it becomes a completely dysfunctional thing. The only thing I could think of, especially within sports, would be they're going to use that as a way to cut all funding or remove that department as, a more, I guess, like, I don't want to say skeezy, but like the psychological operation aspect of, like, if we can put someone who's bad at the head, we could justify the removal of the entirety as of a whole.
Yeah,
You know,
hadn't thought of it from that angle, but I suppose if you're doing budget cuts, I mean, how often do you see, when people cut sporting programs, it's obviously usually the smaller ones, which usually aren't set up for the best success to begin with because they don't have a lot of money to begin with. But I hadn't thought of it from that angle. Obviously, where my head goes is like, yeah, thinking reasonably, you would think like if someone's doing a bad job, you either need to like get them better at it or get rid of them. But I think when you're the one making that decision, it's probably a lot harder, especially like you may like like that might be a really good person. They just may not be very good at their job. And I think that's where it probably makes it pretty tough. I've obviously never been in that situation, but like it's probably a lot easier to fire someone who sucks at their job and also sucks as a human versus someone who sucks at their job and is like a really good person. I think
yeah,
that's probably where, that dilemma comes from.
to some extent, though, shouldn't you be able to, for lack of a better term, separate church and state, or personal life and work, to where you're like, I can like you, but you just don't cut it here, right? And
Right.
it's an uncomfortable conversation that,
Mm-hmm.
in all fairness, I think most people aren't equipped to handle, and just be like, look,
Yeah. I think that's what makes, managing people difficult is because a lot of people can't do that, I would say. And again, see, this
yeah,
is me as someone who hasn't had to manage people, but I can even tell you, like, for me, like, that would be hard. Now, other people maybe have, different ways of handling that, but I think that is case in point right there. Like, yeah, logically, like if someone's not cutting it, you should probably get someone else. But it's a lot harder when you're kind of the person making that decision.
yeah. I think in that same realm, everybody is very scared of making a mistake, and not to go back, like, I know we talked about pre-show. I was reading through like the Innovator's DNA, another great book. If anybody does want to pick that one up, it's a very short read, a little repetitive towards the back half of the book, but what they kind of get into is that, you know founders or innovators, in the sense, and they do talk a lot about like founders on the aspect of being innovators as they create new products, new things to create business models from. They're very, very, very okay with making a mistake on the fly. They are, and in fact, they almost promote that aspect to it, where it's like, if we can just make a decision and execute it, we'll be able to, at the bare minimum, we'll be able to learn from it to prevent it from happening again. And if we do it early, it will be a less costly mistake than if we never make the mistake. We have paralysis by analysis, and we never move forward from it till we're in a position where, if we do make the mistake, we get more scared because there's more on the line. Every business person, every coach, every person who's been in a job, and, we kind of revere them as a wise human being, they tell you how much they've learned from their mistakes early on, because they were just willing to just go after things, and they're glad that they happened, which makes them appear more wise now because they've learned from that. In that same extent, as an employee, yeah, obviously we don't want weaponized incompetence, but like to a certain extent, it's like you shouldn't be as afraid of making a mistake because you went for something. And, whether it be myself, if I look for it like from my employees underneath me, or if I look at it from like the sports realm with like my interns, it's like I'd rather you make a decision. Obviously, not something egregious that hurts somebody or anything, but I'd rather you make a decision, go for it, knowing that you have the safety net around me right now where I can clean it up. So I can kind of see that you have like that little bit of gumption to you of like you're willing to try versus waiting for me to tell you the next move. I'll tell you, as a manager, having people who have worked for me, who do work for me, one of those things is when they come to you and say, "This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm planning on doing. This is where I want to go with it." And all I have to do is read through that little bit or have them explain to me, and I just go, "Okay," or "No, change this." Is so much better than having to constantly think of all the smaller issues underneath you, which then pulls you back away from the things that you're trying to do that is maybe a larger pick or big picture item. So like in that sense, it's like how would we, being in the positions we're at, right? You obviously with the Cubs, you've moved yourself up, you know, not in a sense of, the Peter principle, but being competent to move up and then, continuously moving to where you may have employees or people that work underneath you, whether they be seasonal, interns, whatever it is, myself included on that side of, interns that are learning from me in the, corporate world, having employees underneath you. How do we remove the Peter principle? How do we remove the Dilbert principle? What is it on us to not become part of that, and B, prevent ourselves from doing that to somebody else?
Well, to me, I think you make a really good point about being willing to make mistakes. Listened to a podcast on Jeff Bezos not too long ago, and and this is pretty common with like a lot of like founders, is they're big on like, yeah, make mistakes because at least like make decisions quickly. Most of them are reversible and you'll be able to kind of course correct and then you'll learn from that for the next time. But don't like not make a decision and then, like a bad decision is better than no decision to an extent. And I
Mm-hmm.
think especially like as you're young, people are expecting you to make more mistakes. You're probably going to have a little bit more leeway with that versus if you just never ever want to make mistakes and then you get to a point where you're in like a higher position. One, I think people are probably generally less tolerable of people that have been doing something for longer at making mistakes. They generally expect that you've been doing this for a while. You should probably know what you're doing. And I would also argue that if you're not like pushing the envelope and making those mistakes and learning from them early on, you probably have less of a chance to get to those higher positions anyway. So I think that's something that should be like you shouldn't lose that throughout your career. Obviously, like you said, like don't do something egregious, but I think that also goes along with like fostering an environment where you're not, punished for, making small mistakes as long as like you had a thought process and you can learn from them and just kind of having a culture within your workspace where you're able to ask questions even if they seem kind of stupid. You're able to have your opinions questioned. You're able to make mistakes and learn from them. Those are kind of my strategies that I think of immediately in order to try to kind of avoid that. And then also, I know it said they're like, essentially like people are very unlikely to refuse a promotion. I think that's pretty common amongst everybody. Like if someone's going to tell you like, hey, I'm going to pay you a lot more money to do this thing that's slightly different, you're probably going to take it, like especially if you're young. I think obviously you want to be open-minded because you don't know, maybe you're a coach and you've never done something more like managerial or administrative, and you may end up being really good at it, having aptitude for it, and loving it.
Mm-hmm.
But also kind of knowing what you want. Like for me personally, like I see like myself, like I want to continue to like be a coach. I don't really want to be like a more of like administrator or like what we would call like a coordinator here at this level, where it's more like managing, essentially coaching coaches and managing stuff like that. I would much rather, especially now, make less money and be able to be kind of on the floor, like day to day with people, day to day with athletes and working with them. That's just personally what I want right now. Does that mean in 5 years that I won't want to do the coordinator thing, or if it came up, maybe I'd think twice about it, maybe. But I think being clear about what you want, because as we're kind of get into with one of the topics that you brought up, like you have to kind of take control of your career, because if you don't take control of it, other people will definitely try to steer it for you. I think that's another thing that you can do to try to kind of avoid that. If you know that you don't want to do something, like as far as like I don't want a job like this, you're probably the people around you probably aren't going to be looking to you for that, because they know if you don't want to do it, they're probably not going to want to promote you to it, or they're probably going to want to find something. If they do want to promote you, they're going to try to figure out a role that looks a little bit more like you want it to look. So that's kind of my I guess potential solutions to avoiding that.
There almost has to be this a very uncomfortable conversation with yourself of not letting yourself become complacent. Like I think a complacency bias is one of those things that will inevitably start to shift that wake towards the shore of the Peter or the Dilbert principle. You know, having expectations that are clear and communicated down from you and down from above you to you are two of the biggest things. We talk about a lot of different books and a lot of different theories, but like, one of the big ones here would, Jocko's book, you know, extreme ownership. And one of those things that they talk about is very clear, simple, thought out, and communicated through every channel on what is the mission, what is the goal, what are the details, what do you need to know. If those are communicated downward and explained clearly, that and allowing yourself to answer questions when things aren't as clear, and kind of having that, like, I guess a certain aspect of like objectivity to it, to where it's not going to be a personal attack if someone does ask for clarification, and then providing those answers. Number one, I think that clears up so much, just because it keeps you open on that like open door policy to those around you to be able to ask and question things. Number two, once that's been communicated, you're able to observe. You're able to see how people work within the confines that you've given, and see where they kind of take that bandwidth and act upon it. I think in three, having good enough relationships with those around you, both above and below and laterally, I guess all three, to be able to take, in a sense, criticism or constructive feedback, however you want to fucking call it, take the criticism and seek it out. I think that's a big thing too, is seek the criticism and be okay with like, this will make me better. And understand that those once those relationships are in place, it's not personal. It's a lot of people will tell you criticism that are close to you. They'll tell you this criticism because they want to see you thrive, not because they're trying to tear you down. They're trying to give you those holes within the structure that can be filled, and what can be perfected. Take that and run with it, and that will slowly diminish how much of the Peter principle, the Dilbert principle, or even like a lateral arabesque, and whichever theory or fallacy you want to insert into this, the more you have that in your life. And this doesn't have, I'll say this, it doesn't have to be this constant I'm grinding and always trying to be better. Don't be corny. Be open to fluid change, and perfecting or honing in on the craft of whatever it is where you may be lacking. That will do so much more than any systematic structure that you've built in order to remove this. And when something still can't get right, grow up, pull up your pants, put your suspenders on, and have the uncomfortable conversation that nobody wants to have. That eventually all good things must come to an end. And even if you like that person, if they can't cut it, are you more concerned about that person or your own livelihood? Especially if if you're your own business, you think of like a private sector. This is where I think this can really apply because it blends the two from like a corporate world and the sports perspective. You own a gym. You have a incompetent coach who cannot get things done right. You really like him though. You're friends. You hired him. At a certain level, you either got to get them. You have to. Maybe they're not course correcting themselves. You have to either get involved and get that done, or you got to cut them loose because guess what, man? You got a lease space that you're paying $8,000 a month on, and he's not or she's not, whoever it is, they're not doing what they need to do to get that money to come in through the door. You can't keep paying him for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, little like dig into that a little bit more. I feel like just being able to have those like uncomfortable, difficult conversations in general, whether it's work, relationships, anything in life, that's like such an underrated skill, especially for, you know, I personally like I'm not someone who like seeks out conflict. Like I don't like conflict. A lot of people don't like to have those, but I just think that's a very underrated skill, especially like in modern day. I hate to like harp on young people, but
But
it's tough, and like I really do mean like it's not just work, like in your relationships as well. Like if you like whether that be with like a significant other or friends or people you're working with, they're uncomfortable, but like they're uncomfortable because like they're gonna be worth something in the end. Like the easy conversations don't really help push the needle as far, or they can't help course correct as much as those difficult conversations. It's just like a general rule of thumb that like things that are worth having or worth pursuing are usually a little bit more difficult, and the difficult conversations is no exception to that.
to some extent too, I do believe that the more it's like war of attrition on this, that like the more you do this, the easier it gets. That first time sucks, you know, that sucks. Hearing you're not good at something,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a lot of the world where no, like you had said, like especially nowadays, like in the modern day, people aren't necessarily telling you shit sucks. They're gonna say the environment around you sucks, almost like a little bit of like a self victimization, but they're not gonna tell you maybe this is your fault. You know, great term, kind of great saying that we heard, time and time again from I think a pretty important person and a mentor in our life is, you know, your life sucks because you suck.
Yep. If your life sucks, you suck. Yep.
In some extent, you're like maybe it's your outlook, maybe it's the way your actions, whatever it is. Your life sucks because you suck. Change it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people aren't okay having that conversation with themselves or others. And even if it's just changing how you look at things of like, well, I got to work like 12 hours, like, not to be that guy, but like you could not have a job,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or like we could be in World War II and you'd be like, well, how about 24 hours a day? And it's a very high stress situation.
Yeah, 100%. I think, and those conversations are always they're going to be tough, but I think having good relationships with people and doing the work up front makes them a little bit easier because yes, they're still going to be tough, but like that's to me that's a way to like show that someone cares about you or that you care about someone else if you're willing to like give them that real talk. But that can't be the only time like you talk to them is like you're just shitting on them. Like you have to have like having a good
A
relationship up
balance.
front. Yeah, like I think I mean, the closer you are to someone, then the more like they know that you actually like care about they care about you and you care about them, the better they're going to be able to take those conversations and you as well. I think just one more thing to kind of cap off talking about the Peter principle is I think from the manager's perspective as well, it talks about because this is actually a book, guys. Like you can read. I think it's literally just called the Peter Principle. It looks pretty old. Looks like it said it was
1970.
1960. Yeah, 1969, 1970. So But it essentially says, it gives kind of a breakdown summary, and it says there's two methods of achieving promotion: push and pull. And essentially, the push method is, that's on you. It's the employee's own efforts. You know, they're working hard, they're trying to self improve, they're taking courses, they're doing the continuing education. You know, that's the thing that like you should be doing anyway. But it says this is usually not very effective due to the seniority factor. You know, we see this a lot of times. People that have been around for longer typically are favored for promotions, or just because they're older, have more experience, whether that experience is actually like valid or not. I think you're seeing a little bit less of this now, which I think is a good thing. Like, people should, you know, if you're good for the job, it shouldn't matter if you have X amount of years of experience or have, you know, certain logos. But essentially it says not usually very effective due to the seniority factor. The next level up is often fully occupied, blocking the path to promotion. And then there's the pull method. And on the other hand, that's far more effective, and it refers to the accelerated promotion brought about by the efforts of an employee's mentors or patrons. So essentially, the boss has a favorite, and they tend to promote those favorites, you know, at a quicker rate, or maybe they, you know, have them take a big jump when maybe they're not ready for it. So I think you have to be careful as, you know, the boss, so to say. If you have someone who you think is good, and you think, you have to be careful not to, because you might be thinking, you know, okay, I really like this person, they're doing good, I'm going to have them take a big jump. You may be kind of setting them up, you potentially could be setting them up for failure by putting them in a spot they're not ready for. Yes, they're doing a good job, but you may be screwing up their development long term by having them skip some key developmental steps, if that makes sense. Like, for example, if my first job, you know, I feel like my first job was really about perfect for like the skill level I was at. Like, there were some things that were like a little bit above, you know, just, you want something that's a little bit above what you're capable of, because that's how you like grow. You know, it's just essentially progressive overload for your job. You want it like a little bit out of reach, but if it's too far out of reach, you're going to fail, you're going to get frustrated, you're not going to learn. Versus if I would have like went from there to, you know, okay, assistant director, or like, all right, you're in charge of a big sport like men's basketball or something like that. I think I probably wouldn't have gotten as much out of it development wise. You know, I probably would have felt good about myself, but I would have I don't think it would have been as good for me long term. So I think that's something to think about. Like, if you're the one managing people, and again, you know, seeing this as someone who hasn't managed people, but maybe you can speak to that a little bit, like a team builder. Like, maybe if you had someone who you just really liked as a person, you thought they were super cool, they were also doing good in the job, but like, you probably wouldn't want to like just have them jump over everybody else if you thought that they were going to miss those kind of key developmental steps that they could get at those lower positions.
This is actually perfect timing. We went through a little bit of a structure change. This is what, you know, one thing that I do really like about working there, you know, and one of my mentors that was there, he's now left. Unfortunately, it really sucks, but shout out my boy Kyle. You know, he got a CTO job, so he was ready to grow. um, but like, one of the things that is not preached like outwardly, but like a silent preach, is very much like, you build the skills and you show the work, and then the promotion comes later. Which, to the outside eye, everyone's like, why the fuck would I do anything outside of my career? Like, you know, don't act above your pay grade kind of a thing. Everyone's like, why would you do that? It makes you far more competent when you do get that. And then it becomes more of your daily life, and that is your schedule. Um, you know, to an extent, like when I got hired, I was entry level, kind of worked up, became a senior aspect where kind of like, okay, you're going to handle the complex stuff. You'll deal with a lot more of like the things that go upward versus just dealing with outside customers. Then became a manager, really started to oversee, you know, that department, the growth and the onboarding, the hiring. After that, it became, you know, what was the next step? And it was always, and being in a startup, it's kind of carve your own path. You know, it's kind of like the Goosebumps books, where you could flip to page 47 or go back to 34 because it was a different piece of the chapter. But it was essentially, you know, what happens now? Do you really want to just be a really good manager and stop? Or, you know, we had another product that was taking off. We had other aspects that you could kind of put your fingers in those pies. And it was like, okay, well, they're not ready for me to be now my job title, director of customer success. It was like, okay, what can I do to influence these products that can help? What skills can I get? Okay, well, this one is acting differently because of this. What can I take from what we currently do, bring it over there, outfit it to that one, and set it up? Great. How do I influence that? What does it need? Start to identify those things. And the really nice thing is you see the people before you who kind of have moved up. And if you're, in my opinion, if you have enough intelligence, you'll kind of watch their behavior and how they move and what they're doing, and you'll see, and they're going to leave you context clues all over the place. Okay, well, they kind of did stuff like this to help get this off the ground. Maybe I can try something like that. They're going to fail. I failed 1,000 times. It happens. You learn from it, you grow from it, and then you have somebody else learn from your mistakes as well. Be able to laugh at yourself, be able to do that. But you kind of start to outfit this skill set, get into small projects that are, and this is what I really like about Team Builder is it's like, hey, you're going to work 40 hours a week, 32 to 36 of it. That's like what your job title is. That other 4 to 8 hours, that is going to be the small project work where you're passionate about something. And I did some things on, building some programs. And, when you first start, you're like, that's awesome. I can kind of integrate both. And then afterwards, I started looking a little bit more through it. And I was like, okay, but there's like a bigger thing that we can get done here. And I can help grow myself and the company. Start to spend that time on that. Work with the development team, talk with features, talk with, the head of our product, talk with our product manager, really become ingrained in how we can get things having upward trajectory. And that's what helped the most. And then ironically, having very uncomfortable conversations. And that was one thing that, again, Kyle was a mentor of mine for a year, like meeting with him regularly. And he would purposefully ask me difficult questions for me to ask, the people who I directly report to. And it was like, what do you see as a shortcoming of me that would prevent, things in the future? What can I do? Right now, everything appears good on paper inside of my department. Where do you see this kind of looking like a problem? What roadblocks would we have ahead? And then start to think to yourself, for us, it was like, we have systems in place. Does this system works for our current size? If we tripled our current size, would this system work? Why not? Okay, now we have a couple things, and then you start to work on those. And it's much less about what you do, but like the thought process of works that helps you get better for the next level, and there's parallels. Again, we've always talked about the parallels of that into like S&C sports performance, where it's like, okay, I'm a great coach. That's awesome. Where would I be a shortcoming to where if I were a director, what's not scalable for my process right now? When I first started, it was like coach relationships. When I was fresh out of school, became like an assistant, and then kind of got essentially pulled up to director in this sense. It was coach relationships. I was good with a couple of them, but let bad relationships ruin a lot of things. And it was like, okay, that's a problem. How do I overcome that? Well, now when somebody else has an issue, they're able to talk to me about that. I'm able to use that experience, that failure, to be better. And you start to equip yourself with a larger, broader skill set in order to be ready for that next step. Just having the coach relationships or like those like kind of make them happy conversations, even though you're going to do right by the team and what you think is best to put the best product forward, even though they may want something that doesn't really affect or, might be inhibitive. How do you give them the bad news? How are you polite but diplomatic? How do you tell them, hey, this isn't a good idea without offending them? Because people will become attached to the idea as a personification of it versus like, hey, I see what you're trying to do. This might work better, and it's all about wording. Unfortunately, it's not always what you say, it's how you say it. And learning that was a really big like game changer for me of like being able to effectively communicate.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, it's obviously I defer to you because like I have no experience of like managing people. So something that I'd probably like. I mean, I would like to do eventually because I do want to have my own facility. So I need to do. But yeah, I think there's some really good nuggets in there.
Now, this is not to say I'm great. I'm a fucking loser, and any of my employees would tell you that they've seen me fuck up. But they'll also tell you like I'm the first person to be like, this one's on me. Like that's my fault. So
Right.
I think having the humility to do that is really good. Um,
Yeah. Well, I feel like just like showing that like you're willing to mess up probably kind of lightens the mood on them and makes them a little bit more comfortable to kind of like strive and be able to make a mistake as well. You know, I wouldn't want to work with someone who's like, all right, like I'm perfect. Like I'm gonna put the pressure on you to like never make a mistake because then you're just kind of walking on eggshells the whole time.
exactly. And like we had Hewitt on here. Hewitt is, you know, he's a guy that he's a master of humility in admitting an error. He is an absolute master of it. And if you come to him with like, kind of like, hey, I messed this up. What would you do to kind of course correct here? He'll sit there and tell you 5 stories of here's why it's okay because it could have been so much worse because I did so much worse. Don't
Mm-hmm.
worry about it. And it's not like hey, who gives a shit? It's very much like, we'll learn from it. It's all good. Here's how we fix it. This is what I would do. And you're able to just take that and go. And he's a great boss in that terms, just being able to like do that and come to him with a mistake. And that's like really trickled down from him all the way, through myself, to be able to do that. So I think that helps a ton too. DeMarco, another great guy. I mean, I work for him. You've worked for him. He's a guy that's gonna, on the surface, you're like, he's got everything figured out, and he's more than happy to tell you of like, here's where I screwed up, man. Like
Mm-hmm.
those kind of people make very good leaders and can remove the Peter principle or the Dilbert principle by instilling some of those like intangibles to the people below them.
Yeah. No, I agree. You don't want to work for like a robot who doesn't, because the chances are like if I mean everyone's made mistakes, so they're probably just hiding it, and
Yeah,
that's you don't want that.
100%. But to the same extent, and this is probably a really good segue into our next topic, is like you are in control. You know, you get to pick if you want to work for that dictator because maybe it's something other aspects of the job are a lucrative position, or if you're, you know, maybe on this like self-efficacy kind of like side of things, do you want to have that person who's going to make you grow as a coach, as a worker, as a manager, as an administrative aspect, whatever it is, right? And that's kind of like I said, really good segue onto like our don't be the train. Um, and that kind of splinters off into other aspects similar to the Peter principle here. But essentially, again, another person really teaching me a lot in my life and as an employee, as a manager, as a coach, as a person. Again, DeMarco kind of bringing this up here of like don't be the train. It's a really good theory, and it's essentially, you know, a train is on a track, right? Don't be the train who's just stuck on this track, and don't allow just the preconceived path to just direct where your decisions and your choices can be made, or how you want to lead your life, however broad or however narrow you want to look at this as a theory. Whether it's like don't have a preconceived path for your entire life and never stray from it, or don't have those decisions that you could change whatever the current situation is. um, and I know like we talked about it before the show. You dug into it a little bit more with the station and the people not being stagnant on that train as a passenger. If you want to kind of go into that, Frenchie.
Yeah, I really like this, and it talked about like the whole article. It's I'm not going to read from it because it is a pretty long article, but essentially broke down the analogy into what each part of it means, and it talked about how the train is kind of like your journey and like your purpose. So like you're riding the train, obviously, and says being on the train equals, actively choosing your path. And it talked also about don't just stay at the station and try to convince other people to get on the train that you want, because, everyone kind of has their own separate journey. Just get on the train, make sure it goes on the path you want it, and you're going to pick up people along the way. The people that want to be on that train are going to board that train along the way. And another good point it made was like, don't fuel your train with ego, because fueling your train with ego is like putting, diesel into like a regular gas type of car. You want to be able to fuel your train with, your genuine desires, I guess, if that makes sense, instead of, because we touched on this earlier in the episode, if you don't take a direction for your career, people will kind of push you towards, what best serves them. That's kind of my opinion of things. So I think this is a really good analogy of like, obviously, like if you've seen a train track, you can see it kind of like branches off certain times. Like if the train wants to turn to go on a different route, make sure that you're the one boarding the train that you want, not just boarding the train like, all right, everyone's getting on this one, which is like kind of the sort of groupthink, herd mentality. Everyone wants to go on this, generally accepted path versus, no, I'm actually going to board this train. I'm going to go on this track because that's what I truly want, not because someone else is kind of pressuring you to do that. And then, when talking about like not fueling the train with ego, taking a step back and not, just saying like, okay, I want to go on this path because this is what, is going to make me feel and look and feel important and make, other people think that I'm cool. But what do you actually want out of your life? And I think the whole sentiment of like, don't be the train as well is like, you're on the train, you aren't the train. You're riding the train to get to your destination. The train, like, don't be a part of the train. Don't be afraid to kind of get off where you want on your, chosen stop. And like you said, kind of just like taking ownership of your life, even when that looks a little bit different from what is expected from you, and choosing what you want versus choosing what is, the expected path, whether that be, kind of like we just talked about, you feel like you need to get the job that just pays the most money instead of getting the job that you think is actually going to truly make you fulfilled. And obviously those, you can't always do that. Obviously, like if you have a family, you need to be able to provide for them. But I think it's more available to you than people think. And I just wonder how often people choose the jobs they choose solely because of like the status and the pay grade that's associated with those things versus thinking about what they truly want. And I think part of it is like a flaw of kind of the system of schooling. Like you have to pick the major that you want to do very early on, and then after you get the degree, then you actually get to do the thing that was made for. You don't really get to see like, oh, I think I want to do this, let's try it. Oh, I actually hate it. Oh, well, good, now I can pivot to this. A lot of times like you might, you hear people of like, oh, like I got the degree and I'm like, oh shit, I actually hate this, but you didn't know that beforehand. So I think that's kind of like one of the flaws of like the current like school system, and why I think it could be useful to kind of go back to more of like an apprentice type of model where like, okay, you're going to do this thing beforehand for years on end to see if you like it, instead of just saying, okay, I think I'll like this. This makes a lot of money. I'm going to do this. And then on the back end being like, oh shit, I'm actually miserable doing this. So easier said than done though. Much easier said than done.
I think so. And one of the other ones is, we kind of alluded to it, both of us, but like adapting to change, not just like choosing change, but adapting to it, and they talk about in this theory, if you miss your stop, don't be afraid to get off, take a breath and wait for the next one to go back. It's like, we talked about the failures and like being okay and being, having the humility to kind of wear that and just kind of learn from it. But it really coincides together on just being okay with a mistake, being all right with like, okay, this didn't work. Like, let's try this way. You know, you might look at a map on not to completely talk in, parallels here, but like you're sitting on a train, you see that it diverts into two, and the stop you got to be is between the two pieces. Last time you stayed on the light rail that went towards the green line, and you walked over to the left, and you didn't like where you were walking. There was nothing to see, nothing to do. But this time you're going to take the red line and you're going to walk right. You know, be okay with the fact that you can just swap. You don't have to take the same path over and over and over again, whether that be choosing a new job, choosing different situations in your personal life, however you want to go about things. There's so much that, and I mean, not maybe this isn't Jake, but it's more of his mom, but Jake's takes. He always brings up this one thing that his mom would talk about, and it's his mom would make him make like essentially like a line on a piece of paper. And she would say, I want you to make a chunk for grade school, middle school, a chunk for high school, a chunk for college. And, out of, say it's 85 years of life expectancy, look how small that piece is. It's okay. Like, how long have you, and now he relates it now to Elon. And he's like, well, I've been here for, really a year ish coming up. And he's like, look how, feels like forever when you're in it, but just because that becomes part of your daily life, but it's such a small period of time, and he's, we look at it like ourselves and we're like, I'm 29, you're what, 25, 26,
26.
26. Yeah. Like we're not even, I mean, I'm a little closer towards death. Maybe that's just on the amount of energy drinks and age, but just for the sake of the argument here, like that's such a small portion of it. We're still extremely young. We're okay to make mistakes, and that's whatever it is. But it's such a small portion of what's been going on that if you just take that step back, you're like, there's so much more that you can live, grow, experience, do, have fun, all these things. And that's kind of like what I kind of view as like that, the train stop where it's like you missed your stop. Like it's okay. Just keep going. Get off on the next one. Like if you don't sweat the mistake that you made, but you treat it as like, not to be Bob Ross, but a happy accident. Maybe you get off at the stop and you find that new restaurant. Those kinds of things is where it's like you can have those experiences and be open and adaptable. A lot of people are very, very, very maybe afraid or uncomfortable with change. If you're adaptable to it, that's the people who will survive. We have nuclear fallout happen. Your whole life is gone. You survive that. Now it's a wasteland. Be the one that's adaptable to change and can thrive in the new environment. Put yourself in a situation now to where maybe, you don't have to maybe just quit your job and do something completely different, but find something new that you can get into. You'll learn. And by association, that learning will make you better in something else, whatever it is. But it's a really, really good theory to kind of look into and think about. So, like
Yeah.
I was gonna say for like what do you like when you're looking at that? What's like the big takeaway from you if you're like looking to intrinsically take anything home?
Well, another good point that the article made that I'm not going to tie into this is like there's two really main things that can take you off course: your ego and other people. So like submitting to other people's plans because we're scared of what we have planned or we kind of lack confidence to make that happen. So I think that's something to think about. And it says to go into the ego a little bit deeper. It says, if you fuel your train with ego, you'll appear to be moving in the sense of taking action, but these actions will be unreal and unmotivated by your real values and connection to the whole. This means you'll take yourself further and further away from where you actually want to be or like your true reality. That's a really, to me, I think about it because like you hear a lot of people, and like I've tried to do this before and it just has never really like worked out for me. Like think about like, all right, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? I don't think that's a very good, like, usually it's an interview question, which to me, it's like kind of like a shitty interview question.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I just don't like it. I used to think about that like, oh, like I want to do this by this age. You hear all the people like, I want to be married by this age. I want to be here by this age, this and that. And what I've come to realize in kind of my very short time, career, like you can't plan that shit. And like the more you try to plan it, the more you're gonna miss out on what comes naturally. So I just kind of try to think about, for me, like if you ask my career goals, I don't have something where it's like, naturally someone in my position would be like, all right, I want to work, I want to work in the big leagues. Like I want to work at the major league level, and people would be like, oh, that's a really good goal. Like people, not, no one's going to raise their eyebrow on that. They're going to think that's a good goal. But for me, it's really just like, I don't want to commit to that and then feel like I need to follow that through, even if I like don't like it. What if I kind of tell people like I think this is going to be like a big telltale year for me, because this is going to be my first year experiencing like the affiliate season, kind of the lifestyle there. And I want to really take time to be like to think about like if I actually enjoy it or not, because if I do, I think that's something that I probably want to continue pursuing, but I don't want to force myself into that route if I just don't really like it. Like if I think it's meh, or if I just don't have a very good time, I don't really enjoy it. Yeah, like it's cool to say like, oh, I worked in the big leagues, and maybe for some people like going through stuff that they don't enjoy in order to achieve a goal that they set out, X amount of years ago is worth it. But for me, I think to have like your full like intent into something and actually do the best you can at it, like you need to be able to like enjoy it to some extent. I think it's just being like truthful with what you want and not feeling bad if that's not what people think that you should be doing, like following the path of like climbing the ladder. That's easy. That's kind of like par for the course. That's what everyone wants to do, and that's what everyone mostly ends up doing. It's a little bit harder, and I know we've talked about like people that have kind of made seemingly like taken a little bit different paths, and from the outside it kind of seems like, oh, like why would you take a job that's less prestigious or less money or at a lower level? But I think that's almost like harder to do, because like people are expecting you to just kind of follow that path. But I think it's more rewarding to the individual to kind of stay true to what they actually want and being able to continually question that throughout a career. um, Not just, it's easier when I feel like it's probably easier when you're young too. If I'm 10 years older, maybe it'll be a little bit tougher, but I think just trying not to lose that like questioning. I think of like a Steve Jobs quote. He kind of said like, every day I look in the mirror, and essentially it was, I'm going to butcher the saying, but it's something like, am I excited? Like if today were the last day, my last day on earth, would I want to be doing what I'm about to do today? And he basically said, like, if the answer is no for more than a few days in a row, like, I know I have to change something. Like, there's going to be days, obviously, where you're like, I definitely don't want to do this, but it has to get done. But if every day you're waking up and you're saying, like, well, if this were my last day, I definitely wouldn't want to be doing this. And that's kind of just day after day after day. You just don't look forward to what you're doing. You might want to think about making a change. And clearly that's easier said than done. But I think just being honest with yourself and being okay with like accepting that you're going to change as you grow, and your goals might change, your priorities might change as things change. Maybe right now when you're young and you don't have a family versus you're older and you do have a family, or you have different responsibilities, or you just have different interests. I think constantly reevaluating that and not just blindly following, a goal that you set at like an arbitrary point in time. Like how many times have your, career goals, we've talked about this, how many times have they changed already? Like in like our short relatively to a lot of other people, like short careers. So I think it really comes down to a concept of like self-acceptance, if you will. And like this kind of the whole premise of this concept is just being willing to take your own path and not becoming super susceptible to kind of that herd mentality and that group think. Yeah, that's where I'm at with that right now. And kind of to my point, like that will probably also change. So it's definitely something to think about though, because like
Yeah.
you don't want to just be like, there's another side of that where you're just kind of aimless and wandering. So I think for me, it's like, I know the things that are important to me in like a job. And those things for me are like, okay, I know I want to work with good people and I want to be in an environment where I can continue to learn and grow. I think those two things, like regardless of like the sport, the level, the position, those two things are probably going to serve me well, regardless of what what the job title is. So I feel pretty good about those two things, like helping me be in a good spot versus, oh, I want to be this position at this school at this level with this sport. I try to
It's
think of it more as
such,
like process as opposed to outcome, as corny as that sounds. But
but I mean, it can be
you can't always
corny.
control the outcome. Like,
Yeah.
everyone wants, there's a lot of people that want this one specific job, but only one person can have it. Versus if you just focus on things that like qualities of improving your like skill set or your, character as a person, your skill set as a coach. I think rarely are you going to find that if you improve those things over time, that's not going to get you in a better spot.
Very true. And I think in the sense of, if you look at like the outcome, a lot of people kind of go into the ends justify the means, versus the means kind of will bring you to the end goal of what you're doing, and how you're kind of operating will kind of lead you to the path that will be the most correct, versus if you're there to get that at all costs, at what point do you sacrifice, whether it be some aspect of your morality or your current spectrum of what you really want and what you believe in? Are you kind of blurring those lines and pushing that line, I guess, or crossing it, in order to get there? And is that worth it to you? Because if that's the case, then did you really have that morality aspect? Did you really have that? I guess I don't really know. I'm kind of blanking on the word. If I think about it, I'm blanking on it. But I guess like that pillar of your personality in order to get there. And if so, there's a lot of like self questioning to do, which does make me think in a lot of aspects. Not to be that this episode is to make you sit there and question yourself and your aspects of your life as much as possible, but in the past hour and 23 on the dot, 23 minutes, that's where I've become on this like very like self questioning of, is this the right move? Is this the right thing? Is this how I want to proceed with this?
Yeah, same here. And I think another thing to think about too is don't be impulsive with it. There's some days where I think like, oh, I want to be working, at this certain level, like, oh, I want to be a major league strength coach and I want to try to, get to that top level and, win a World Series. And like, that is like, I think all our goal, that's everyone's goal at the Cubs, is to win a World Series. Regardless of what level you're working at. But sometimes I think like, oh, I just want to like work at the highest level and that's all I care about. And then there's other days where I'm like, do I actually want to do that? Or there's other days where I'm like, I just kind of want to move to the middle of nowhere and be off the grid and just have a like, so you have to think about that over time and ask yourself those questions, when you're in different states of mind, you different times of the day, different times of the year, consistently. Because if you just, followed, you could be having a bad day and you don't want to make like an impulsive decision like that. I think it's something that needs to be done like consistently, and then over time, like anything, like you'll kind of see the trends. And that's where you can probably like make your decisions off of. Because there's some days where it's, I think I want to do this. There's some days I think I want to do this. There's some days I think I want to do this. But over time, you'll see like, oh, like I kind of I keep coming back to this thing more often than not. And that's probably the path that you want to, or I keep, thinking that this is the way I want to go. And that's probably the thing that you want to try to pursue, I would think. Versus just saying, okay, this is the goal, and then you never kind of reflect on it. And then all of a sudden you're 5 years into this thing. Maybe you're not really enjoying it as much. Maybe you're not, it's not the same as when you first started out, but you're too stubborn to re-question and course correct if that's what you actually want to do or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is very much so easier said
than done.
That takes a level of humility and like just talk about having an uncomfortable conversation with yourself, and just even asking people, those around you that are going to actually like give you legit feedback on that. Yeah,
I agree. Should we close this thing down on that?
Yeah. I swear we're not tripping on mushrooms, guys. Swear.
100%.
Yeah. How we freaking gotten into these more philosophical topics, but I do like it. It
is
like
fun.
I said. Yeah, it's fun to kind of, we started with some principles. Like, I'm all for like learning about like that kind of stuff and like cognitive biases that like, the tricks that we kind of play on ourselves. But I think a good quote to end on here is like, we talk about science on this podcast. I think science is looking for answers, but we also talk about philosophy on this podcast a little bit as well. Philosophy,
which is questioning everything.
Yes, like science is looking for answers. Philosophy is asking questions. So both are important. Both are something that I think everyone can benefit from. I think that's what we'll leave y'all with. Should we rate this energy drink?
Let's rate this energy drink.
Yeah, on a more Bev Boys type of note. For me, it was about what I expected in terms of me liking it. Again, I'm not a huge cranberry fan. I do like the Welch's grape. I'm usually I favor more of the sweet side of the spectrum as opposed to the tart. It's still a good flavor, but it's not one of my favorite ghost flavors. I think I would have to go, obviously we know the formula is great. The price is pretty fair for what you get. And just the flavor for me, it definitely wouldn't be a daily driver. I'd probably pick it up from time to time if I wanted something a little bit different, but it definitely wouldn't be one of my preferred choices. But even saying that, I would have to go like a 7.1. This is still like a really, it's better than a lot of other energy drinks, but for me, like in the scheme of things, it's average just for the sake that I'm not a huge fan of the cranberry. So, but I do appreciate that I definitely did taste the grape and the cran. So I think it's a well done flavor. I'm just not a big fan of cranberry.
I want to go kind of a rookie score here, but 7.7. Very solid. A little bit higher than you. Mainly of the effects, kind of what we talked about this, earlier in the episode, is that it's a little bit more on the tart side. I like the finish. Very solid. Like this could be one of those ones you just grab whenever you see it, kind of go. Am I seeking it out regularly? I think that's what pushes things into the 8s above and 9s. Is that the one where you're gonna be like, I might, instead of picking one up on my way to work, will I drive somewhere to go pick up a case? I don't know if I go to pick up a case of this. If it's in a variety pack, I'll take it. Or if it's there at the gas station, I'm going to grab it. Do I seek it out? I don't know. But 7.7, that's my review on that one.
All right,
Take us away, French.
there you have it. Ghost Welch's Grape-Cran. As usual, guys, definitely appreciate you guys tuning in, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure to subscribe on whatever platform that you do listen on. It really helps us push with the algorithm. Share it with a friend. BevBoys.tv on Instagram for past, future, present clips of our episodes. We have our those are associated with our personal accounts too. If you want any more like training content, we've set our socials a million times. You know where to find us. BevBoys.com if you do want to buy some merch. And stay tuned for next week's episode. Peace.